Right, well, good evening, everybody. Tonight's presentation is being hosted by the Chelmsford Branch. So I'm Rebecca and I'm the Chelmsford Branch Social Secretary. I'd like to introduce Roy Chandler to you, who's very well known in IWA circles and has been chair of Essex Waterways, which is the Chelmer Blackwater Navigation for about 15 years now, Roy, something like that.
Yes.
And has actually had a very significant impact on Chelmsford and its waterways generally. Chelmsford was made a city a few years ago, and it's been greatly enhanced by its waterways going through the middle of it. Anyway, but I won't want to steal Roy's thunder at all, because he's got lots of photographs to show you and lots of things to tell you. So I'll hand over to Roy, and thank you all, and I hope you enjoy this evening.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. Just a little bit of background from myself. Christine, my wife, and I joined IWA in 1974, following several canal holidays, which included a trip through rather neglected canals in Birmingham. And we were so impressed by the experience and by the potential that we felt that we should show support for the waterways for their restoration and recreational use, which is why we joined IWA. I was working as an architect in private practice at that time, not knowing that my future career would involve becoming an historic buildings and conservation advisor to Essex County Council, advising local authorities in Essex, and later Assistant Chief Design Planner at Chelmsford Borough Council. These roles were to involve me very directly with Chelmsford's waterways and the Chelmer Blackwater Navigation. And I'll be looking at how IWA and the Council have really carried out quite a bit of enhancement to Chelmsford's waterways. So if we look at a map of Chelmsford, it's got two main rivers. It's got the River Cann on the left-hand side of the slide, the River Chelmer on the right, and then Springfield Basin down towards the bottom on the right-hand side, which is the terminus of the Chelmer and Blackwater Navigation. And you can see from that slide the green areas, which are in fact floodplains for the rivers, but they are also very attractive parkland spaces and green lungs within the town. Rebecca mentioned that Chelmsford had recently become a city, so you will find me at times referring to Chelmsford as a town, possibly on some of the earlier slides, but on later slides I may often refer it to it as a city, but it is the same place. So the role of the rivers: they are a natural feature, they are a wildlife habitat, a visual amenity, a recreational asset, and also a flood relief system. And the water is very much a key to regeneration, investment, leisure activities. It creates character for the town, and it also has the potential for waterside walks. And the rivers in Chelmsford benefit from a water retention system. Here by the Essex Record Office on the Chelmer, there's an automatic sluice or weir, which retains the water level in the city centre, keeping it at a norm, but allowing flood flows to come through the weir onto the floodplains below. That has the benefit of making the waterways in Chelmsford usable for activities such as boating. This is a slide taken in 1993, when IWA managed to arrange for local councillors to take a trip on the rivers, because the city, or the town as it was then, always looked different from the water. Unfortunately, we didn't pick a very good day weather-wise for the trip, but it was successful. And this slide also shows the flood relief scheme that was put in the 60s, when both the rivers in the town were put into concrete channels. Quite an unfortunate move, and something that wouldn't happen today. And this was at a time when Chelmsford really ignored its waterways. It turned its back on the waterways, backs of buildings, scrapyards here, on the can, and loads of parking. And who was to know that here in Wharf Road, just behind these redundant industrial sheds, there was Springfield Basin, a canal basin with no public access, but right in the heart of the town. The commercial use of the Chelmer Blackwater ceased in 1972 when the timber barges, the lighters, stopped bringing timber into Chelmsford, and road use became the fashion. You can see a couple of barges here unloading at Brown's timber yard. When that use ceased, the Springfield Basin became derelict. This is a view of the top end of the basin, 1992, showing the state it had got into, still surrounded by industrial type commercial uses, no public access. The Springfield Lock, which provided the link from the navigation into the basin, was derelict. The listed bridge had been vandalized. In 1985, Chelmsford Branch IWA produced a report entitled Springfield Basin and Beyond. Very well received at the time. The report really started IWA's involvement to a much greater extent. There was by this time some public use of the navigation for recreational purposes, but Springfield Basin was still derelict, and it was surrounded by vacant gasworks, brownfield land. The report promotes restoration of the surrounding land. It promoted the restoration of the basin and a new navigable link between the basin and the rivers in the town, so that you could bypass the automatic weir and actually get boats right into the centre. By 1992, the situation hadn't changed, and the climate had, however, because it was realised that there was now interest in this area, and IWA was able to establish a series of partnerships, with IWA saying, well, we will actually restore the lock in order to save costs. We will also restore and reinstate the feeder stream that supplies water to the canal basin using our volunteers. And National Rivers Authority agreed to dredge the canal basin, with the council allowing access on the adjoining land, and the county council undertaking repairing the listed Springfield Bridge. So very quickly, by the next year, 1993, we actually had the grand reopening of the Springfield Basin. Boats could once again come into the town as it was then. However, there was still no public access at Springfield Basin. So the council, this is the view taken in 1996, the council designated a conservation area for the whole of the navigation in conjunction with Malden District Council as well, because they knew redevelopment would take place, and this would help guide the redevelopment and ensure a character that suited the importance of the navigation. Then in 1994, the council produced a first planning brief for the area entitled Springfield Basin and Chelmer Waterside. And that planning brief created confidence in the area for developers who were able to purchase land and start redeveloping. And the brief allowed for sites to be developed individually as they became available, but all fitting together into an overall master plan. And therefore the scene of what was a derelict basin changed to an active basin. It featured a very successful waterside restaurant here at Waterfront Place, and the opening up of the basin to the public. Sorry. And that development still continues today. This is another view from the basin taken some years later of Smith's Yard. That scene has now gone, And this is a current scene looking towards that site, with residential developments continuing around the basin. And those developments, as they continue, are creating new pedestrian links. This is Creasy Quay in the basin. It's provided a new pedestrian link through into Navigation Road that has become a very popular shortcut for people walking into the town centre. So the Viewing Wharf Road that I showed you earlier, where there was no public access back in 1995, now looks like this, with links into the basin and views into the basin as well. Unfortunately, the hairdressers that was there for many years in that corner building has recently vacated due to the COVID situation. But hopefully we'll see another suitable use back before long. But Chelmer Waterside, which was mentioned in that brief, is a much bigger area. You can see Springfield Basin towards the centre of the slide, the darker colour of water, the River Chelmer to the left, and the automatic sluice by the Record Office, and then it's splitting into the two rivers, the Chelmer and the Can. And the whole of that area, it was realised, was brownfield land right in the city centre that would be redeveloped. So another bit of planning work was done by the council, a series of planning briefs, a strategy first of all, to guide the planning briefs for the wider area based on the success of what had happened at Springfield Basin. And that brief split the area into various zones, and each of those zones had a planning brief, and each of those zones looked at the land ownerships so that again land could be brought forward when it was available for purchase without having to wait for comprehensive land assembly. Area 4 here is shown on the slide, split into 3, and one of those went ahead with development very quickly. But all those sites would fit into a grand master plan. So even though they could be brought forward for development individually, at the end of the day, they would fit this grand plan for the whole area. And that grand plan showed the new cut that IWA had proposed back in 1985, linking the Chelmer Blackwater Navigation with the rivers in the centre. And an example here of a site from Area 4, Area 4C, which was next to Springfield Lock. The brief showed how that might be developed, how it could incorporate a little marina for the new development. And that brief resulted in the redevelopment of that site fairly quickly. This view was taken at the time that Springfield Basin was still derelict. The site we're looking at as part of 4, Area 4 is on the right-hand side, the scrapyard is 4C. And that was redeveloped as Lockside Marina, with the marina in the centre of the development. And this is a slide taken when IWA arranged for a grand opening of that marina basin, and an assembly of boats who all found their way into the marina to prove that it worked. Development in that area is still continuing on the Chelmer Waterside site. This is the opposite side of the lock to Lockside Marina. The Taylor Wimpey scheme is underway. This is a fairly recent slide. There are over 400 apartments being built on this side. And this is a current view looking down towards Springfield Basin from Springfield Lock, showing that development underway and beginning to really take shape. As you move down the basin, there are waterside townhouses, there is new public open space, and a new footpath cycleway link through on that side of the navigation, which will connect up with the wider footpath cycleway network. And over on the Chelmer, by the automatic weir, the record office here you can see on the left-hand side of the slide, there will be a new public space here next to the record office as well. More of an urban space this time. Let's now take a look at the rivers in Chelmsford, and I don't know the people attending remember this view, a view taken from Springfield Road in Chelmsford, looking down the River Chelmer, and typical of the time, the rivers surrounded by parked cars and backs of buildings. And that site was redeveloped with encouragement by the council for new shopping areas, new riverside walks and spaces. The Meadows shopping centre here on the right hand side. The original scheme for this again proposed that the servicing would be on the perimeter of it, on the riverside banks, but the council renegotiated the scheme so that the servicing was brought in from High Bridge Road, which is the bridge you can see on the back of the slide, and it was brought in at first floor level into the centre at first floor level of the shopping development. So the riversides could be given over to public spaces. And those public spaces have proved very popular in the what is now the city. And change continues. This is on the opposite side of what is Backbank Square in the last slide. And this was the former Argos building, which is now being converted into yet another riverside pub restaurant, and it's being given new fenestration to overlook the rivers and new riverside terraces at the upper level. And heading over onto the River Cann, a similar view, the concreted channels from the flood relief scheme, and both sides of the river fronted by parked cars, backs of buildings, the back of the Odeon Cinema there, the old Odeon Cinema, Bailey Bridge in the background of the slide. That scene with the coming of the Meadows and the redevelopment of the Odeon Cinema, we changed to this, opening up the riversides for public use. Unfortunately, even the Meadows Shopping Centre at that stage still had some quite blank walls on the frontages that it wasn't possible to open up. It also, one of the biggest disappointments, put in this low bridge. IWA fought very hard to try and get a greater arch, a greater camber on the bridge, but the developers argued that if this was any steeper, the shoppers from the new Waitrose supermarket that was going in the development wouldn't be able to push their full shopping trolleys over the bridge to the car park on the other side of the river. So unfortunately we lost out on that one, but we do still believe, particularly now there's no supermarket in the development, that it will be possible to improve that bridge to actually put a greater arch span on it so we can get navigation headroom underneath. I mentioned there were still blank frontages in the Meadows development, but we had a very enthusiastic council at the time. The councillors were very keen to make more of the rivers, and I had a supportive chief exec who felt that we could do positive planning. And I was allowed to actually go and talk to adjoining owners, such as the little shopping unit cafe behind the windows here, and say, well, had you actually thought about opening up your frontage? There's an opportunity here that you could take if you were to open up that frontage, and actually you could benefit from using the riverside space and the aspect, the sunny aspect that is there. And of course, it took a while to persuade people, but quite a lot of the operators did jump at the opportunity of extra space. And similarly, going back to the other side of the Meadows on the Chelmer, quite a lot of blank walls here. There was a BHS retail store behind these. They didn't want shop fronts. They wanted the wall space to display goods internally. But we were able to persuade the owners of the building that they could actually put some little kiosks on this frontage to enliven the frontage and make it more attractive. And those little kiosks underneath the arches there were in fact only about 2 meters deep, but they did trade very successfully until recently, when they have now been vacated because the vacant BHS store has plans to turn into a travel lodge. And similarly, on the Cannes, there were still service yards that weren't really needed or were over large. This white building was infilling of a service yard that were really no longer required, but a beneficial gain to the waterfront. And likewise, this service area, just a little bit further upstream at the back of Marks and Spencer's, it was proposed that the car parking behind this wall should be removed and it should be redeveloped for shops and flats overlooking the river. There is now a planning permission at long last to actually put flats on that site. And even the Quadrant store on the opposite side of the river has had its facade altered for new leisure uses, looking over the river. There is a gym, a fitness centre there, and a new restaurant cafe on the ground floor. And developers were realizing by this time, and they were persuaded, that the rivers and the parks were an ideal setting for their buildings. They were beneficial to the setting of the buildings and the surrounds, but they also, the occupants, were able to overlook these attractive spaces right in the heart of the town. And it was possible to use those developments to actually green up the concrete on the river walls, to plant and let it overhang and help conceal the concrete. Just up from that slide, this is a very recent bridge installed by the council to link 2 areas of parkland, one either side of the river. And this one indeed has navigation headroom beneath it. And opening up and using the river frontage, it even goes as far upstream as Springfield Mill, where they were encouraged to use the outside, what was again a service parking area, as outside eating space. And coming back onto the River Cannes, opposite the meadows, this little single-story building was a cafe bar with an outside terrace, but it wasn't really making use of the riverside setting. So we approached them and said, well, wouldn't it be nice if you actually put in a riverside terrace overlooking the river? And this cantilever structure was built after quite a bit of negotiation involving the Environment Agency and others, but it opened up as a very successful little sitting space for the restaurant. And development along the rivers allowed the potential to actually put in the missing links. There was no riverside access along this side of the Cannes opposite Central Park, but this redevelopment not only put in planting on the riverbank, but it also provided a footpath cycleway in an area that previously didn't have one. And that link continues through under the railway viaduct to the outlying housing areas, and now provides a very popular route into the city centre. And this site, you can see here on the left, was the site I showed at the beginning of the presentation of the scrapyard. This is a view looking down towards the city centre and showing that it didn't have a proper riverside access, although there was clearly a desire line through the site. It was seen by that muddy path. That now looks like that, with a very well used popular route into the city centre alongside the river. And those new routes were able to provide links into the adjoining housing areas so that they are well used and attractive spaces free of traffic and noise. Several links connecting into that new path, into the surrounding areas. And then we're going back onto the River Chelmer in the centre, 1998 view, the back of Gray's Brewery Yard that was originally on conversion occupied by Habitat. And again, an overload, large service area, no riverside access to that concrete channel, underused town centre land and a bit of an eyesore. Redevelopment was encouraged to put a new frontage in, a new recreational leisure building with a new riverside walk, and a view looking from the other direction downstream. The development also removed that redundant bridge, quite an expensive item to remove, but it was helping to open up the waterways for future use, and also scheme, as I say, put in the riverside walk. It also put in planters along the riverside on the concrete walls to try and soften the effect of that concrete. Unfortunately, these have been removed since, as the council felt that they weren't able to maintain them, although that is surprising because they do manage to maintain planters in the centre of the dual carriageway on Parkway in Chelmsford. On the left-hand side there, you can see another extension. The pub in the bottom of that office block was persuaded to put a rear extension on that fronted the rivers, and also a first floor terrace, which again in nice days is a very popular location. So the rivers were gradually opened up as a whole series of new parks and riverside routes, footpaths, cycleways, connecting the outlying residential areas wide into the city centre with a green lung. New bridges were built to connect the spaces and the walks. This one at the Anglia University, upstream on the Chelmer. And even the commercial areas, the new office and commercial developments were encouraged to put in cycleways, footpaths alongside the river and actually open up the river frontages and look over them rather than turn their backs on them. And it was possible to encourage greater use of the water. Now it had a much better setting. It was an attraction to actually be on the water. And the old navigation company for a while operated this little trip boat on the rivers in the centre. And it was quite a popular operation while it lasted. And of course, the Sea Cadets based in the town are great users of the water, even though we've got those low bridges in the Springfield Road area. And they took on the task of actually removing litter from the rivers on a regular basis. And of course, Chelmsford Canoe Club, great users of the river, both above the weir and the navigation and below the weir for events and training. And it is really good to see the activity on the rivers. And we even had a floating restaurant moored on the river Cam. Again, popular venue while it lasted. And IWA operated for many years an annual raft race to bring a bit more interest and activity to the water and to actually promote the potential use of the rivers in the centre. And this work resulted in 2003 in the Borough Council becoming a beacon council because of the work it was doing with its planning department and carrying out positive planning briefs. It was seen as an example to other councils throughout the country. And in the same year, the council also won the BURA, the British Urban Regeneration Authority's Waterways Renaissance Award. It was a national award given to the council for the work they'd done on actually enhancing the waterways in Chelmsford. And this is the award being presented to the chief exec and his planner. But the work didn't stop there. This is a view at the rear of the High Street in Chelmsford onto the River Chelmer, the Riverside Ice and Leisure Centre as it was in the background. Land here again, no public access, or no official public access. You can see a desire line through there. A muddy path has been created through what was very much underused town centre land, used for car parking and servicing. And with the coming of park and ride, etc., and new car parks provided elsewhere, these private parking areas weren't seen as being essential to the city. So another planning brief was produced, because way back in the 1970s, this land was proposed for redevelopment for town centre uses, but nothing had happened. And the reason nothing had happened, one of the reasons was because it was very complicated land ownership. You can see from this diagram the number of different ownerships in the area. And by producing a planning brief and showing, adopting this as planning policy, showing what the council would like to see on the site, how it could be developed, was enough to give confidence to a local developer, to Aquila, to actually carry out land assembly and commence redevelopment of the area. And this sketch is showing new riverside walks, new riverside spaces, because one of the dilemmas here was the fact that the land flooded, and as you built it, you would actually be taking up the flood storage. So the scheme was designed to allow flood storage compensation in a bowl in the centre of the public open space. And the first phase of that development went underway and was well received, with new riverside restaurants and again a popular riverside cycleway connection. And then the second phase of the development, now known as Bond Street, which brought with it John Lewis, a load of additional shops into Chelmsford, and new riverside cinemas and eating places. And this is the view from the other side of the river, and looking back towards it here again, opened up with a new cycleway, footpath through the front, and riverside eateries along that frontage. And yet, just a few metres away from that development, it's still quite a green and pleasant riverside access. And a more recent development at Riverside Ice and Leisure, the council's leisure centre, that has been redeveloped on what was again a car park, an improved widened riverside walk. These routes are very popular walks with people coming into the city. Here you can see the river's just on the left of the tree belt, just behind the tree belt. And that has provided a new frontage overlooking the river on what was formerly the car park frontage. But what about the future? We haven't given up on the rivers in Chelmsford, although they have, we feel, improved quite a lot. We have joined, IWA has joined with other interested parties. It's joined with the Chelmer Canal Trust and the Chelmsford Civic Society to form a group called CRACKLE, Chelmsford Rivers and Canal Link. And the group is really trying to resurrect the waterway interest in Chelmsford. We felt that it hadn't been there over recent years. It needed to be resurrected. We wanted to reinforce planning policies for the city centre, create partnerships and seize opportunities. And also, we didn't want to give up on the potential to actually achieve navigation on the Chelmer and Can in the city centre. So the new cut was very much on the agenda of the Crackle Group, and we produced a new feasibility report to present to the council to promote its construction once again. Because the line for that new cut is still there, it's the edge of the area that's currently being redeveloped. The land on the right of this will be redeveloped in the near future, but the Record Office was built to overlook the new cut, and we really wanted to make sure this still happened. And this was the Crackle Group's image of that new link. And we have had some success. The council, in fact, have been talking to the group, and they are, in fact, in favour of constructing a new lock alongside the automatic weir rather than providing a new cut. And the proposal is that a new lock be built where the boat rollers are, on the River Chelmer, to bypass the automatic weir. And whilst our preference is still a cut, obviously we are supporting this scheme because it is better to have a navigable link into the city centre than no link at all. And this would actually open up the rivers, quite a wide area in the rivers, particularly on the Can, to future navigation use, adding to the interest and the character of the city centre. And the Bailey Bridge just above that is on the line of the cut, and this is where the council want to provide a new access road into Chelmer Waterside, and they currently have plans to put a new bridge over, a nice high bridge for waterway users as well. And we are currently talking to the council about the exact position of this, because we do need to make sure that its position still allows for the alignment, a sensible alignment of the new lock, and doesn't prejudice the future of that and stop it from actually working, because we do hope to see that constructed in the near future. So the council have in fact set up a waterways working group. There is now renewed interest in the waterways in Chelmsford, and I'm pleased to report that IWA is a stakeholder in those workshops. We have been invited to workshops already, and it is the intention that we will continue to do so. And we are told those workshops will be looking not only at the rivers and the waterways in the city centre, but they want to take a wider look at the Chelmer Blackwater Navigation and the rivers system as well, throughout the district, right down to Paper Mill, Sandford Mill as well en route, and possibly beyond. And that will be interesting, because at the moment the Chelmer and Blackwater is extremely popular with day visitors, has been this last year or two, particularly during COVID, and there is a pressure there that is not being dealt with, because there is no public parking, etc., at the little honeypots that people want to visit. So it is good that the council are taking an interest, and we hope we'll be able to work together and solve some of those ongoing problems. So thank you very much for your interest, and I'll hand back to Rebecca and see if we can answer any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Right, hello again everybody. Well, thank you very much, Roy. That was amazingly interesting. I actually was born in Chelmsford, and I can remember the days when it was very hard to even find the river because it was behind some building or a car park or whatever. Looking at those pictures today, as I'm sure everybody thought, the incredible difference. And I would just like to tell everybody, because Roy won't tell you this himself, but Roy has been like a one-man band in starting this process with colleagues from the council and other leaders and partnerships to actually get this rejuvenation of Chelmsford, regeneration, and has made a major part of that. Looking at how beautiful it now looks with all of the access points, it really is a credit to you, Roy, and to the other people that you've worked with along the way. So we've got some questions, and I think we should take those now. We've had 74 participants this evening, so that's really good. We have a couple of questions from Colin. The first one is about flood problems. You have, I think, answered that partly, but I think it might be good to just talk about the general, the history of the flooding problems in Chelmsford and what it's now looking like, because it has been quite a feature of Chelmsford over the years.
Yes, the system in Chelmsford, the automatic weir is designed to discharge the water from the flood flows more rapidly as the water levels increase, and to discharge it onto the floodplains below the city centre, formerly known as the Badder Meads. There are, however, storage areas above the main parts of the town in Central Park and also upstream on the Chelmer. In times of severe flood, Central Park will flood, and the adjoining parkland will flood as well. But that is controlled flooding that aims to prevent the buildings in the city centre from actually flooding. And I can only, in my time, remember one occasion when buildings such as the Meadows development were threatened with flood. The water levels became very close to flooding over the paths and into the shops. And that was at a time when the automatic weir actually got stuck and it wasn't letting the water through. So, there is a system there. There have been plans to put in further flood attenuation measures upstream because with climate change, it is acknowledged by everybody that our flood flows are increasing. We get high volumes quickly, so that is something that the council and the Environment Agency are looking at, is alternative measures to actually hold the water back before it actually gets through Chelmsford.
Okay, thank you. I mean, it's that the Meads area has always had a big flooding area, but it was it's always with a new road going across from the old Army and Navy. It was deliberate that it flooded out onto the Meads, wasn't it? So
yeah, yes, it is. It's designed to get the water out of the build-up area and into the rural areas where it can be accommodated.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Colin's also asked whether there's been any problems with businesses following COVID. It might probably be a little early to know the answer to that, but I suspect there will be, don't you, in terms of empty unit and whatever.
I think, we've already seen, the hairdressers in Sprinkle Basin has disappeared. I think there's a vacant restaurant there. That sort of business, it's going to be very difficult to re-let for a while because the market has disappeared. It's one of the first businesses to be closed down. So I think retail areas, city centres will be affected for a while, but hopefully by making towns and cities more attractive places to visit for a day out, it will help be part of their future. I think shopping had become more of a day trip. People will eat out while they're doing their shopping, etc. And it isn't just a rush into the shops. It can now be a day trip. And I think a nice setting, using your riversides, etc., all part of that experience.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I'm just going to add a comment from Stephen, who said, fabulous, fascinating talk. Thank you, Roy. Before we get on to another question from David Dwyer, which is actually probably a wider context one about could some effort be made to enhance the waterway out in the rural countryside and encourage boat owners to actually use their boats on the canal other than just as a static floating sunbed, and clean them outside to look smarter in the increasing number of towpath users. All would add to the desirability of the environment, as some boat owners seem to add to a scrapyard appearance. I think that's probably true of a number of different waterways.
Yeah, we do on the Chelmer Blackwater, we do try and encourage our owners to actually keep their boats clean, and we do write to them, if they are becoming a bit of an eyesore. As far as other works, there are areas of towpath that could do with improvement with surfacing. However, Essex Waterways is a volunteer-led company. Our income is limited to money we earn from the moorings and from selling willows, etc. If we have spare money after maintaining the navigation, we will improve sections of the towpath, and we have done quite a bit, in fact, in the Heybridge area, the Malden area already. If we can get grant money, we will improve the towpaths, and that is very much on our to-do list, is to continue to improve the well-worn areas of the towpaths so that the public can use them more. And also we'd like to provide some more rural mooring spots, simply for the boaters to stop to moor up for a picnic or stay overnight, and actually to encourage them to use their boats more.
Yeah, that would be great.
So, inclined to agree with what you say.
Yeah, I think you know, if boat owners were previously always mooring up at the lock landing stages, weren't they? So
yes,
if there was more mooring along the navigation, it would be helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Roy. William's asked about the developer. Why do they favour a new lock over a new cut? I think it's the council, William, rather than a developer, and it's probably cost based as the first one. But Roy can probably give a wider answer on behalf of Crackle there.
Yeah, I think at the moment they seem to think that that is the best position for a new access road into Chelmer Waterside. With the amount of development that's going on and proposed in Chelmer Waterside, it needs a new access road purely to serve that development. The existing road system around Wharf Road, Navigation Road, will be oversubscribed unless they do that. And the council feel that is the position to put it in. Also, they accept, and we accept, there are several unknowns with the cut. One of the unknowns, the big unknowns, is the contaminated land because of the former gasworks. That could be a very expensive operation to remove. There are high pressure gas mains in the area, which again the council are hoping to remove in the future, but at the moment they present a problem to the new cut. There are also trunk sewers fairly close to the surface there that are another complication on the cut. So it is felt that the new lock is a more certain and a scheme that could be costed more effectively than the sort of unknown quantities with the cut. Hence, it's the council who would prefer to put the lock in than put the cut in.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually. Thank you. Pam's just asked a question about that lock and said, can any part of the weir be salvaged to create the lock? I think the intention is that the lock will be beside the weir, Pam. That weir would still be necessary for the flood defences for Chelmsford. Is that correct, Roy?
That's exactly it. Yes, they have looked at whether you could convert the lock, the weir to form a lock, but the capacity is needed, particularly with increasing flood flows, climate change. They need the full capacity of that weir. But the boat rollers alongside, in fact, are not used. They don't really work. People carry canoes, bigger boats can't use them. So that does seem an ideal location for a lock. And what we are trying to do is ensure that the position of that lock has minimal effect on the existing weir structure. Because if you start interfering with that weir structure, then the cost of the lock will go up. If you can keep fairly clear of it, not only are your costs reduced, but the operation using the lock is much safer for boaters in times of flood than having to approach a weir alongside a lock that's alongside a weir. You're that little bit further away from it.
Yeah, thank you, Roy. On the same subject, really, the cut and the lock has proved an interesting part of the talk tonight. Michael's asked, if the proposed cut or lock is built, how much further would one be able to navigate? I think the answer to that is quite not very far at the moment, Michael, because of that Waitrose bridge that Roy showed. We call it the Waitrose Bridge, but to be fair, Waitrose went some time ago. But that bridge would need to be raised, wouldn't it, Roy?
Yeah, there are several bridges that need raising. I mean, there are two immediately you get beyond the Bailey Bridge. There are two quite low pedestrian bridges that are pedestrian cycleways, but they also are narrow. So with the new development that's going on in the area, the council are proposing, over 1,000 new residential properties in Waterside area. Those bridges will need to be increased in width to cope with that new development, and that will be the opportunity to replace them with taller, wider structures that allow for navigation headroom. So these are the sort of things that can be done gradually, as the opportunities arise. Those bridges also can form part of the National Cycleway Network. So the fact that they are narrow bridges, is a constraint on that National Cycleway Network. So initially, if those bridges are raised, you'll be able to get up to Backnang Square on the Chelmer. On the Can, if the Waitrose Bridge can be raised, then you're actually up to what we call the Marks and Spencer's Bridge, which is another low one. Well, again, that could be redesigned to give more headroom. Then you've got quite a free route through the Central Park, up past Waterhouse Lane towards Admiral's Park. There'd be quite an extensive area of river on the Can that you could actually navigate. Okay. So worthwhile, we think.
Yeah, absolutely. Pam, you've asked a few questions, so I'm going to pick out one or two of yours and then go back to someone else. But Pam's asked about the black shed. I don't know whether you showed the black shed in the picture or people could see that from the head of the navigation. But it says Pam's asked if a location can be found for the canoe club, if there's any interest in the black shed. Well, that's sort of music to Roy's ears. He's been trying to get someone to be interested in that black shed for a long time, haven't you?
Yeah, it didn't really show on the slides. Well, I didn't pick it out, but it is a sort of surviving shed from the industrial use in the basin. It's the only earliest shed, apart from the one at Waterfront Place, the banqueting hall, that was retained. And I think at the moment the council are marketing it for a storage use. I think it may take a while for it to find a user, particularly given the current COVID situation. I mean, it would make an ideal little tea room, an office, something of that type. It's not very big, but it would be nice to see it reused. I think also what we'd love to see there is the Waterfront Place reused as an eatery, as a restaurant, to actually create a destination point in the basin. I mean, when that was operating, it was an extremely successful restaurant business. Unfortunately, when it was sold, the new operators didn't seem to get to grips with the right market and lost the trade.
Yes, Philip was asking that because he says it's been empty for some time. I think it's been empty about 3 years now, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And it's such a prime location, but it's, you can only do what you can do, can't you? Philip has asked a question about, has there been a sensible approach to balancing safety against access to the rivers? Which I think the answer to that is yes. It's very wide walkways and always barriers and everything else. But don't know whether you want to answer that one any more fully, Roy.
Well, I think, where new walkways have been created, then obviously there have been pedestrian barriers, etc., put in. One of the schemes, I think it was the first phase of Bond Street by Prezzo, did put in a landing stage right down with steps down to water level, and so that, river users could actually stop there and visit the centre. There was, I think somebody did fall in from that. And because of that, the council did put a fence up on it, which I think is a shame, because there are plenty of places where riverside access is available, where massive protection hasn't been put in place, and it's not a problem. But certainly in the city centre, I mean, they have had problems in the past with nightclubs, etc. People coming out of nightclubs and somehow managing to fall over the railings and end up in the water. So yes, I mean, safety is considered every time a new bit of cycleway footpath is put in.
Yeah, but of course, if you go a little bit further down from where the shopping area is, into the main park area, there isn't barriers, is there?
No,
Traditionally, there
no.
isn't in the parks, is there?
No, that's right. Yeah.
Um,
But you've got the green areas, you know, where you just hope people, you know, will be sensible. It would be a great shame if every bit of water had to be fenced off.
yeah, that's true. Yeah. Thank you, Roy. Very interesting question from Alan. He says about the new lock, and will the design be traditional? I guess to look similar to the locks on the Chelmer Blackwater Navigation itself, although obviously that's going to be on the river section, not on the navigation section.
Yeah, no, we've taken the view that as it's a new lock, it would be, you know, current modern design, modern construction. It would probably be actually constructed with steel piles. There is an opportunity to use metal gates instead of timber. The timber gates on the navigation have to be replaced every 25 years. And whilst it's important to keep your historic features, all the locks are listed, so they are repaired like for like. With a new lock, you've got the opportunity that you donate the past, you actually construct to, you know, the current year. So the answer to that is no, it won't replicate the locks. The size will be similar. It won't be any smaller than the existing locks, but it will be modern construction, modern design.
Okay, all right, thank you, Roy. Pam's asked if there could be space for a canoe shoot. Are the canoe club on Crackle, are they represented on that group? I guess they are.
No, they haven't been, but we do talk to the canoe club regularly, and we often meet at their premises from EWL's point of view. We have looked at canoe shoots, etc. It is something that, as the design progresses, you know, what will be looked at. There certainly will be landing stages, etc. But a shoot would be nice if it could be incorporated.
Okay, thank you. Paul's just said an excellent presentation, and how difficult it is to remember what it was like when you look at it today. So, you know, that's very well said. And Collins also said what a very clear and concise, informative presentation it was. So that's always so nice to know. I've got a few questions in the chat box as well. You're rather popular tonight, Roy, so hopefully you weren't going anywhere else. Drop off now. Oh no, that's some notes, I think, saying from Aaron saying he's got to go, but thank you very much. And from Ian saying it was very inspiring and much needed work in many towns and cities. Great example of the added value of the IWA and such professional volunteers. And I think that's true. And I think I'd like to just make that point that I can see a lot of names tonight on the participants list who have been very active in working on working parties with the IWA and generally, you know, doing a lot of work, which has made helped to make the navigation and the rivers and that what it is today, particularly the refurbishment of a Springfield Basin, which was one of the early things really finished in '93. And somebody asked the question earlier, there's so many questions here, I'm sorry that I'm nipping backwards and forwards, but I think Michael asked if the proposed cut or lock is built, how much further, oh, it went, that was about navigation, but somebody asked the question about would the, once the lock is built, about the actual basin, would it be, yes, if the lock is put in, how will the existing basin be developed or the function? But the basin has already been substantially developed. Roy showed a picture showing how the flats and that have been built around it. And those flats, I think, are now very premium prices, aren't they, Roy? Because they're looking out over such a beautiful venue. So it's probably only that restaurant down the end and where you showed us where the hairdressers was, that is now closed down, that are the only really vacant areas in that.
No, there's more to come. There's more to come. There's land on, I showed you area 4. There's a lot more land there. Between Travis Perkins and the Lockside Marina, there is vacant land which the council is assembling and is intending will be redeveloped and put a new, well, there is a towpath past a lot of it anyway. And I think the council's aim eventually is to try and move Travis Perkins and actually open up that frontage as well. You know, they feel that's really a residential area rather than a commercial sort of industrial area, and their longer term aim is the whole of that side will be redeveloped as well to provide much needed housing in the city.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there is more to come. The gasworks land will be probably the next site that comes up for development, which is the one the council are working on bringing forward now. Removing the gas mains, removing the high pressure reduction equipment, hopefully, so that can be redeveloped as well. And that will provide a better link too from the city centre into the waterside area.
So Roy, if they decide to do that area and do the lock rather than the cut, would the area outside the Essex Records Office also be included in that particular plan? And what do you think might go in there?
In front of the record office,
yes.
or yeah, between the records office and the multi-storey car park. The aim there will be mainly for residential uses. But again, we're hoping the council will be keen to accommodate the existing river users. The Sea Cadets were in that area, the Canoe Club are as well. Both those users would love to stay in the city centre, and quite honestly, we would like to see them in the city centre. I mean, they're ideal uses, leisure uses, and youth uses that ought to be, accessible in the city, providing activity on the waterways as well as the recreational uses.
Yes.
So,
are the Sea Cadets not operating anymore from?
I think the Sea Cadets are operating, but not on the rivers. They have had to vacate their premises. They're in need of quite a lot of renovation, and we're hopeful that they will be provided or will be able to achieve new premises, as the area redevelops. It would be a shame if we lose an active unit like that from the rivers.
Yes, absolutely. And also they were so good at doing all the litter collection, weren't they?
And that's right. And you're giving youngsters not only a purpose, but you're giving them, an interest in the waterways. A lot of those will go on to be, beneficial to the local area in the longer term.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Martin's just come back and said his question was more to do with how the water space would be used within the basin. I think that's the question.
Well, the water space in the basin, at the moment, there are moorings there, there's space for visiting boats. As the Taylor Wimpey scheme develops, there is a permission to use part of the canal frontage there for some more residential moorings. There is a big demand in the area for residential moorings, and there is a planning permission to put an additional 10 residential moorings in that area. But other than that, the basin will remain for recreational use. And if the navigation extends onto the rivers in the city centre, we hope more people will visit Springfield Basin en route, will stay there overnight, etc. And the activity there will increase.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, well, I think we ought to just wind up pretty soon now, but Pam's just asked another question about when do we think the lock might be built, which I think is quite topical, really, given the where we are.
It's a difficult one. I think, let's say we've been pushing for something since 1985. We are a lot closer now than we have been in the past. I think that it may be possible to see something happening there in 2 to 3 years. I'd like to see something like that happen, and that could be a possibility.
I guess COVID will not have helped bring that agenda forward, will it, in terms of essential expenditure? That could be tricky.
No, things seem to have slowed down a bit during this session. But the council are keen to move Chelmer Waterside forward. They have some government funding that's been allocated that they have to use to help bring forward that land for redevelopment to solve its problems. And obviously nobody would want to see, that government money not being used for the benefit of Chelmsford. So they do need to get on with it as quickly as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Roy, you mentioned earlier, as a question really for me, that the awards that Chelmsford had received for the regeneration work that they'd done. Do you think that the river, opening up the river side was a major factor to that.
Yes, I think in both awards it was. Certainly the Bureau one was specifically, the Waterways Renaissance Award was specifically for the work that had been done on the rivers. And the Beacon Award involved that, but it also involved the work the council was doing on new housing areas in Chelmsford, using the Essex Design Guide, improving the standard of new residential areas and getting away from the sort of everywhere 1960s houses.
Yes,
and that was very much part of that Beacon Award as well.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think I'm going to close tonight's session out. I'd like to say thank you to Derek, who has been our Zoom champion tonight and has been managing our waiting room and everything else. And a very big thank you to Roy again for such lots of people have said, a very concise, informative presentation, very well put together, very interesting, lots of very interesting pictures. Sometimes when something changes, we've often forgotten to take a picture of what it used to look like, and it's very good. And that was the case with our talk last time with Tim Lewis, who had the foresight to take a picture and then to take a picture later on, and it makes a big difference to see the before and after, particularly that very ugly shots of Chelmer, of Springfield Basin, when it was all derelict and overgrown. I mean, it's it was shocking to see what it looked like then and how beautiful it looks today. So thank you very much, Roy, for your presentation, for your time, for your efforts for Essex Waterways and the IWA, and for Chelmsford. As a local resident and a member of the IWA, etc., personally very grateful, as I know a lot of people are here. Everybody needs some leadership, and I think you've really demonstrated that and still demonstrating it, working hard for the sake of the waterways and the river and recreational use for people who are boat owners, walkers, cyclists, canoeists, whatever. So thank you very much. And
okay, well, thank you, and thank all the people who have attended and spent their evening listening to what we've got to say. Thank you all very much.